Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for continuing to hold the hearing as people have got to go back and forth to vote. I appreciate that very much. It's good to see you again. You've got a tough job in the interim. It's a tougher job, actually, once you take on the title. You have a role very similar to what Cass Sunstein had before he took that position in OIRA, and kind of a temporary role in between as an advisor and counselor. But we're looking forward to you taking on the role and be able to see where that goes from here. I have also been intrigued by the conversation of late about challenging you about any kind of conversations you've had with White House staff or with anyone within the White House. That kind of deliberatory process seems to be pretty normal. I don't often ask other senators what their conversation was like with their staff, and before I answered a question from them, I wanted to know all of their conversation with their staff ahead of time. Neither do I go to their staff and ask for their staff to be able to tell me all of their conversation with that senator or with that House member. So it is kind of a fascinating conversation that's going on right now about deliberatory process and engagement, but I appreciate you giving us as straightforward answers as you can as you go through the process, still protecting the integrity of conversations that should be protected as we go through the process.
Well, thank you, Senator.
Let me ask you a little bit about the role of OIRA and what you see as that role. You are not the absolute backstop, but we do count on OIRA to be a nonpartisan backstop in the regulatory process. So tell me what you see as the role of OIRA.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator, for that question. Really, I think the role of OIRA is to ensure a process that results in regulations for which costs and benefits are accurately and transparently accounted for, that contain full and adequate legal rationales explaining the agency action, and that are the result of a single executive voice, of a robust interagency process that ensures that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, which is a prerequisite for rational regulating.
So previous administrations at time have allowed the agencies to be able to determine what's a significant regulation and what's not significant as they go through the process. What is guidance? What's not guidance? How can OIRA be more engaged in the process of being a second set of eyes, if I can say it that way, to an agency to be able to say, no, this one's going to need a cost-benefit analysis. You can't just say that doesn't look significant to me and be able to move on, or what's a regulation and what's a guidance, and when they can do a redefinition.
Yes, Senator. Certainly on the issue of making significance determinations, I've always believed that Executive Order 12866 is very, very clear that the OIRA administrator makes the final decision as to significance. Of course, we always, when I was acting administrator, always welcomed the input and views of our agency colleagues on that question, but that was ultimately my decision to make as the acting administrator, and I exercised that authority. I believe that on the question of guidance documents, one very helpful recent change is the executive order, EO 13891, of course, modeled on the chair's Good Act. Under that order, OIRA will be seeing many more guidance documents than it has heretofore, and will have the authority to make significance determinations with respect to those documents as well. So I do think there may have been a bit of a lacuna previously in the framework. Agencies may not have been entirely certain what OIRA's authorities were with respect to guidance documents, even though OIRA has reviewed guidance documents for decades, even before the executive order. But I think the executive order, once it's fully implemented in regulations over the course of the next few months, will eliminate that.
So I'm going to follow up on the next few months on that, because I believe that has a February deadline to be fully implemented. Do you think that's going to be implemented by February and be done by the end of February, and all agencies are compliant with that?
Senator, OIRA has already begun to review regulations from agencies, and OMB is certainly hurrying them along.
So we're going to make it?
There are a lot of agencies in the federal government. There may be one or two laggards that we're going to push them as hard as we can.
So let me ask a deeper question. It's a philosophical question. Several presidents have been hesitant to be able to take on the issue of independent agencies being on some kind of review. I have been one of those folks that said independent agencies are not independent of everyone. All of us have oversight at some level. And for an independent agency to say, no, we're fine, we don't need anyone to check our homework, I think is inconsistent with just agencies having basic oversight in the structure. Do you have an opinion about independent agencies having some OIRA oversight when they're promulgating rules?
Senator, I certainly believe that every agency could use some additional eyes, as you put it a minute ago, on cost-benefit analysis to ensure that the cost-benefit analysis is of the highest possible caliber. And obviously, you and others on both sides of the aisle actually have said that one useful way to achieve that result would be OIRA review. review. Now, that would be, of course, a decision for the president, and that's no decision has been made in the executive branch on that subject. But certainly, I think certainly there's a compelling case to be made that has been made by administrators and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
Right. I've noticed in the past that I've dealt with multiple heads of OIRA over the 9 years that I've been total in Congress. And I've noticed the most helpful conversations I've had with the head of OIRA is right after they retire. And then they can give me the most clear, straightforward answers. But regardless of party and background, everyone's protective, and I get that. This last Monday, I released out an annual guide that I put out called Federal Fumbles. It deals with just areas of waste and inefficiencies and puts some recommendations how we can do some things more efficiently. One of the things that drives me crazy is when an agency ends up in a lawsuit because they didn't follow the Administrative Procedures Act. There's a pretty straightforward guideline of what has to be done from start to finish. And when all the boxes haven't been checked and we end up in lots of litigation over the promulgation of a rule or working through a guidance, then the taxpayer spends a ton of money in court trying to be able to process through this. What are you going to do to be able to make sure that for every regulation that goes through, all the boxes have been checked, that the taxpayer is not spending more money on a court case, whether they win or lose it, just because the Administrative Procedures Act was not followed?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I think one of OIRA's central roles is to survey regulations across the government and develop expertise in that central foundation of the regulatory process, the Administrative Procedure Act. And so while I was acting administrator, I would review regulations and work with my staff to review regulations to ensure that those regulations were compliant with the Administrative Procedure Act. And when they were not, I would direct that agencies be informed of that conclusion and that changes would be proposed to those regulations. And of course, also OIRA circulates rules to the Department of Justice and other legal offices across the government for their expertise on that question as well. So, I think keeping OIRA's cross-government expertise in the Administrative Procedure Act strong is very important.
Yeah, we can't stop lawsuits, but we can make sure that when lawsuits are carried out, they're not carried out and everything's overturned on a regulation based on a mistake that everyone should have seen and had basic oversight on. So I appreciate you stepping up to be able to do this. Mr. Chairman, thank you.